Ryan Thorne looked his pregnant wife straight in the eyes on their 7th wedding anniversary and told her to get out. No warning, no discussion, just divorce papers on the table and his mistress waiting in the car downstairs. He gave her $10,000 and told her that was all she deserved after 7 years of marriage. He said she would leave with nothing because that is exactly what she brought into this relationship. A nobody, a librarian, a woman stupid enough to believe his lies. He thought he had won. He thought his expensive lawyers and hidden bank accounts made him untouchable. He thought she would crawl away quietly and disappear. He was wrong. What Ryan did not know was that his wife had been keeping secrets too. Screenshots, voicemails, financial records he never thought she was smart enough to understand. And he definitely did not know about her brother. The brother he had spent 7 years hiding her from. The brother who had just sold his company for $85 million. Ryan wanted to destroy her, but he forgot one crucial thing. You should never underestimate a mother fighting for her child. This is the story of how Sarah Mitchell lost everything, fought back from rock bottom, and watched the man who tried to ruin her get dragged out of a courtroom in handcuffs. But I have to warn you, before the victory comes the heartbreak. Before the justice comes the betrayal. And there is a twist at the end that nobody saw coming. Stay with me. This one is going to leave you speechless. Sarah Mitchell had spent 3 hours preparing for this evening. She had baked Ryan's favorite lasagna from scratch. The recipe her mother used to make before the accident took both her parents 8 years ago. She had hung anniversary streamers in the living room of their modest Manhattan apartment, the silver and white ribbons catching the last rays of sunset streaming through the windows. She had even bought a small chocolate cake from the bakery downstairs. The words, "Happy 7th Anniversary," written in careful blue frosting. At 8 months pregnant, everything took longer now. Her back ached constantly. Her feet were swollen. But Sarah wanted tonight to be perfect. 7 years of marriage deserved celebration, even if the last few years had felt more like endurance than partnership. She smoothed down the front of her maternity dress, a soft navy blue number she had found at a second-hand shop, and altered herself. Sarah had always been good with a needle and thread. Growing up on a farm in Ohio, you learned to make do with what you had. She checked her phone again. No message from Ryan. He was supposed to be home by 7. It was now 8:15. Sarah talked to her belly, something she had started doing in her 5th month when loneliness began settling into her bones like winter cold. Your daddy is just running late, little one. Probably buying mommy something sparkly. Or knowing him, a gift card to Home Depot. She laughed at her own joke, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. The lasagna was getting cold. The candles she had lit were burning down to stubs. Finally, she heard the key in the lock. Ryan Thorne walked through the door looking exactly like what he was, a man who believed the world existed for his convenience. At 38, he had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. His $3,000 suit was perfectly pressed. His salt and pepper hair was expertly styled. He did not look at the streamers. He did not look at the table set for two. He did not look at his pregnant wife standing in the kitchen doorway with hope dying in her eyes. He looked at his phone. "Happy anniversary, babe," Sarah said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Dinner is almost ready. I made your favorite." Ryan finally looked up. His expression was one she had never seen before. Cold. Calculated? Final. "Do not bother," he said. "I am not staying." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. He tossed it onto the dining table, where it landed with a heavy thud next to the anniversary cake. "What is this?" Sarah asked, though something deep in her gut already knew. Something had been wrong for months. The late nights, the business trips, the way he looked through her instead of at her. "Open it!" Sarah walked to the table on unsteady legs. Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. She pulled out the thick stack of papers inside and read the words at the top. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The room tilted. Sarah gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. "Ryan," she whispered, "I do not understand. We just talked about names for the baby last week. We were going to paint the nursery this weekend." Ryan checked his watch, a Rolex that cost more than Sarah's parents' entire farm had been worth. "That was your plan, Sarah. Not mine. I've been planning this for months." He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. hands clasped behind his back like a general surveying a conquered territory. I want you out by Friday, he continued. The apartment lease is in my company's name. The car is a company vehicle. The credit cards are all in my name. According to the prenuptial agreement you signed 7 years ago, you leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her belly. Ryan, I am 8 months pregnant. Where am I supposed to go? He turned to face her, and for the first time, Sarah saw the man her brother Daniel had warned her about all those years ago. The predator behind the charm. The emptiness behind the smile. That is not my problem anymore, Ryan said. You should have thought about that before you became so boring. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and a smile spread across his face. A real smile, the kind Sarah had not seen directed at her in years. That is Madison, he said. She is waiting in the car. We are flying to Miami tonight. She is moving into the penthouse when we get back. Madison. Sarah knew the name. Madison Cole was Ryan's executive assistant, a 26-year-old former model with legs that went on forever and ambition that matched Ryan's own. Sarah had met her at the company Christmas party 3 months ago. She remembered how Madison had laughed too loud at Ryan's jokes, how her hand had lingered too long on his arm. How long? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Does it matter? Ryan shrugged. Sign the papers. My lawyer says you have no claim to anything. The business is in a trust. The properties are in LLCs. You came into this marriage with student debt and a sociology degree. That is what you leave with. He pulled a check from his pocket and placed it on top of the divorce papers. $10,000, relocation fee. I am being generous, Sarah. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Sarah stared at the check. $10,000, 7 years of her life, reduced to a number that would not even cover 2 months' rent in this city. I gave up my career for you, she said, her voice finding strength she did not know she had. I managed this home. I hosted your investors. I edited your proposals. I was there when the Henderson deal almost fell through in 2018. And you were adequately compensated for your time. Ryan sneered. You lived in a nice apartment. You wore nice clothes. You drove a nice car. But that ride is over. He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the door. My lawyer is Simon Vance, the best in the city. If you try to fight this, he will bury you in legal fees until you are living in a cardboard box. Sign the papers, Sarah. Take the money. Disappear quietly. It is the only smart move you have left. He opened the door, then paused. Oh, and leave your keys on the counter. The building manager will let you back in tomorrow to pack your clothes. Only your clothes. Everything else belongs to the company. The door clicked shut behind him. Sarah stood alone in the silent apartment. The anniversary streamers hung limp and foolish above her head. The lasagna sat cold and congealing on the stove. The candles had burned down to nothing, small pools of wax marking the death of everything she thought her life would be. She did not cry. Not yet. Instead, she reached for the papers on the table and began to read. The prenuptial agreement was 12 pages long. Sarah remembered signing it 7 years ago, when she was young and in love and believed that Ryan hung the moon. He had insisted on it, he said, to prove that he was not after her meager savings as a librarian. She had signed without reading it carefully. She had trusted him. Now she read every word. And buried in clause 14, subsection B, she found something interesting. Something Ryan's expensive lawyers had apparently overlooked. In the event that either party is found to have committed adultery, leading to the dissolution of the marriage, the separation of assets clause shall be rendered void. All assets shall become community property, subject to equitable distribution. Sarah read the clause 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. Ryan had just admitted to an affair with Madison Cole. Ryan had just voided his own prenuptial agreement. Sarah placed the papers back on the table. She walked to the bedroom and pulled out a small suitcase. She packed her clothes, her laptop, a photo of her parents, and the burner phone she had bought 6 months ago when something in her gut told her to start preparing for the worst. She did not take the jewelry Ryan had given her. She did not take the designer handbags or the expensive shoes. She did not take anything that belonged to his world. At the door, she paused and looked back at the apartment one last time. 7 years of memories, 7 years of slowly losing herself, 7 years of believing that love meant sacrifice and silence. No more. Sarah Mitchell walked out into the cold New York night with $847 in her personal savings account, a suitcase full of practical clothes, and the first spark of something she had not felt in years. Hope. The women's shelter in Queens smelled like industrial cleaner and despair. Sarah stood in the intake line behind a woman with a black eye and a teenage girl clutching a stuffed rabbit. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everyone in a sickly yellow glow. Sarah had tried to get a hotel room first, but her credit cards had already been canceled. Ryan worked fast. She had tried to call her college friends, but most of those numbers had been disconnected or went to voicemail. Ryan had always found reasons to skip their gatherings, and eventually Sarah had stopped trying to maintain those friendships. She had thought about calling her brother Daniel, but she could not bring herself to dial his number. Not after 7 years of silence, not after she had chosen Ryan over him. So here she was, 8 months pregnant, homeless, waiting in line for a cot in a room full of strangers. Next, called the woman behind the intake desk. Sarah stepped forward. Name? Sarah Mitchell. The woman typed something into her ancient computer. Any children? Sarah placed her hand on her belly. Not yet. 6 weeks until my due date. The woman looked up and her expression softened slightly. Medical needs? Just regular prenatal care. I have been seeing a doctor at the free clinic on 42nd Street. Okay. She handed Sarah a clipboard with a stack of forms. Fill these out. We have a bed available in room 7. Dinner is at 6, lights out at 10. No drugs, no alcohol, no men in the rooms. Questions? Sarah shook her head. Good. She looked back at her computer, then paused. Hang on. She picked up a phone and dialed an extension. Gloria, got another one for you. Pregnant. Looks like she has not eaten in a while. Yeah, room 7. Thanks. She hung up and looked at Sarah. Someone will be by to help you get settled. Next, Sarah found room 7 on the second floor. It was small, barely bigger than a closet, with 4 twin beds crammed against the walls. 3 of the beds were already occupied by lumps under thin blankets. Sarah's bed was in the corner, next to a window that looked out onto a brick wall. She sat down on the mattress. It was thin and lumpy, the springs poking through in places. The pillow smelled like bleach, and suddenly everything hit her at once. She was homeless. Her husband had thrown her away like garbage. Her baby was coming in 6 weeks and she had no home, no job, no family, and $847 to her name. Sarah curled up on the bed and sobbed. She cried for her marriage. She cried for her parents gone these 8 years. She cried for her brother, who had been right about Ryan all along. She cried for the naive girl she had been at 27, who thought love conquered all, and happily ever after was guaranteed. She cried until she had nothing left. A knock on the door made her look up. A black woman in her late 50s stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of tea. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that had clearly seen too much. Mind if I come in? She asked. Sarah wiped her face with the back of her hand. Okay. The woman walked in and sat on the edge of Sarah's bed. She handed her one of the cups. I am Gloria Henderson. Been volunteering here for 12 years. She took a sip of her own tea. You look like you could use a friend. Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I do not even know how I got here. I thought I did everything right. Gloria nodded slowly. The ones who did everything right are usually the ones whose husbands did everything wrong. She looked at Sarah's belly. When are you due? 6 weeks, Gloria smiled, and for the first time since Ryan had handed her those papers, Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Well, that baby has already got good timing. Got you out before you wasted another decade on that man. Sarah laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, but it was still a laugh. How did you know, honey? I have been doing this for 12 years. I can spot a controlling man's handiwork. From a mile away, she patted Sarah's knee. First night is the hardest, but you survived today. That is enough. She stood up. Dinner is in an hour. You should eat something. That baby needs nutrients even if you do not feel hungry. At the door, she paused. Whatever he told you about yourself, it was lies. All of it. You are going to be okay, Sarah. It does not feel like it right now, but you are. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Sarah sat in the silence, holding her tea. She thought about what Gloria had said. She thought about the clause in the prenup that Ryan had overlooked. She thought about the screenshots on her personal phone, the ones she had taken 6 months ago when she first started noticing the jewelry store charges and hotel bookings on their credit card statement. She had never wanted to believe what those charges meant, but she had saved the screenshots anyway. Her mother's voice in her head, the lesson she had drilled into Sarah since childhood. Always keep copies of everything important, not because you do not trust people, but because life is unpredictable. Sarah pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her photos until she found the folder she had hidden inside another folder, inside another folder. The screenshots were all there. $15,000 at Cartier, a suite at the Plaza on a night Ryan claimed to be in Chicago, spa appointments at places Sarah had never been. Evidence. She also had a voicemail. Ryan had called the house phone by mistake 2 months ago, thinking he was calling Madison. Sarah had saved it to her personal phone before deleting it from the answering machine. Baby, I cannot wait to see you tonight. Wear that red thing. More evidence. Ryan thought she was just a librarian who got lucky. He thought she was too stupid to fight back. He thought he had covered all his bases with his expensive lawyers and his shell companies and his offshore accounts. But Ryan had made a mistake. He had underestimated her. Sarah pulled up a search engine on her phone. She typed in Free Legal Aid Family Law New York. The first result was a clinic on the Lower East Side. They had a phone number and office hours starting at 9 in the morning. Sarah saved the number. Then she lay back on her thin mattress in her corner of the women's shelter, and for the first time since her world had collapsed, she allowed herself to imagine a future. It was not the future she had planned. It was not the nursery with yellow walls and the house in the suburbs and the happy family she had dreamed about. But it was hers. Whatever came next, it would be hers. Outside the window, the city hummed with life. Millions of people living their own stories, fighting their own battles, surviving their own betrayals. Sarah placed her hand on her belly and felt her daughter kick. "We are going to be okay, little one," she whispered. I promise. The legal aid clinic was located in a converted storefront between a laundromat and a bodega. The waiting room had plastic chairs bolted to the floor, a water-stained ceiling, and a television mounted in the corner playing daytime talk shows with the sound off. Sarah had been waiting for 2 hours. She did not mind. She had nowhere else to be, and the clinic was warm and dry and did not smell like industrial cleaner. She used the time to organize her evidence on her phone, creating a folder with screenshots and dates and notes about what each piece of documentation proved. "Mitchell," a voice called from the doorway. Sarah looked up. A tired-looking man in his early 40s stood in the doorway, a case file under his arm. He had the rumpled appearance of someone who had been fighting losing battles for too long, but had not yet figured out how to stop. "That is me," Sarah said, struggling to her feet. The man extended his hand. "Marcus Webb. I will be handling your case. Follow me." His office was barely bigger than a closet, with a desk covered in papers and a window that looked out onto an air shaft. Marcus sat down heavily and opened her file. "So," he said, "divorce. Husband is Ryan Thorne, CEO of Thorne Property Group." He looked up at her. "You know who your husband is, right? Financially, I mean." Sarah nodded. "I know he has money. I know he has good lawyers. I know he thinks I am going to roll over and take whatever scraps he offers." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "And are you?" "No," Sarah said. "I am not." For the first time, something like interest flickered in Marcus's eyes. "Tell me why." Sarah pulled out her phone and placed it on his desk. "Because he made a mistake. He admitted to an affair right in front of me, and the prenuptial agreement we signed has an infidelity clause." Marcus picked up the phone and began scrolling through the evidence. His eyebrows rose higher with each screenshot. 15,000 at Cartier, he murmured. "Suite at the Plaza. Spa treatments." He looked up. "And you have been documenting this for how long?" 6 months, Sarah said. "I did not want to believe it at first. But my mother always taught me to keep records of everything. So I did." Marcus played the voicemail. Ryan's voice filled the small office, smooth and confident, speaking words meant for another woman. "Baby, I cannot wait to see you tonight. Wear that red thing." Marcus stopped the recording. "This is good," he said. "This is really good." He pulled a copy of the prenuptial agreement from Sarah's file and flipped to the back pages. Clause 14, subsection B, Sarah said, in the event of adultery. Marcus found the clause and read it carefully. His lips moved as he traced the legal language. Then he sat back with a low whistle. Your husband downloaded this prenup template from the internet, he said. It is a standard form with standard clauses, including a standard infidelity provision that most people do not read carefully. He looked at Sarah with something like respect. Mrs. Thorne, if we can prove adultery in court, this prenup becomes toilet paper. You would have a claim to marital assets. Sarah felt a weight lift from her chest. How much of a claim? Depends on how much he has been hiding. Marcus pulled out a legal pad. But first, let me explain something. Ryan Thorne has money. Real money. He can afford lawyers who will drag this out for years. He can afford private investigators to dig through your life looking for anything to use against you. He can afford to make your life a living hell. He fixed her with a serious look. Fighting him will not be easy. It will not be quick. And there will be times when you want to give up. Are you prepared for that? Sarah thought about her thin mattress at the shelter. She thought about her baby, due in 6 weeks. She thought about the man who had promised to love her forever and then thrown her away like yesterday's garbage. I am prepared, she said. Good. Marcus began writing on his legal pad. Here is what I need from you. Every financial document you can access. Bank statements, tax returns, property records, anything that shows what assets exist in this marriage. I have access to our household credit card account online, Sarah said. He never thought I actually looked at the statements. Perfect, Marcus kept writing. I also need you to stay calm and stay quiet. No angry texts, no confrontations, no social media posts. Everything in writing, everything documented. If Ryan tries to contact you, do not respond. Let him talk to me. He looked up. And Mrs. Thorne, do not sign anything he sends you. Nothing, understand? Sarah nodded. Good. He stood up and extended his hand. I will be in touch soon. Try to get some rest. You are going to need your strength. That night, Sarah sat in her corner of the shelter with Gloria's laptop, which the older woman had generously lent her. She logged into the household credit card account using the password Ryan had never bothered to change. He thought she was too stupid to understand spreadsheets. He was wrong. Sarah began downloading every statement she could find. 3 years of transactions, hotel bookings, jewelry purchases, restaurant receipts for 2 at places she had never been. The evidence piled up, screenshot after screenshot, a paper trail of betrayal. She found the charge for the engagement ring Ryan had bought Madison, $28,000. He had spent more on his mistress's ring than he had on Sarah's. She found monthly payments to a luxury apartment on the Upper West Side, an apartment she had never known existed, an apartment that was probably where Madison lived. She found wire transfers to an LLC in Delaware, hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing into a company Sarah had never heard of. Sarah saved everything. She organized it by date. She made notes explaining what each document showed. By the time the lights-out bell rang at 10, she had compiled a file that would make any forensic accountant weep with joy. Ryan thought he had planned the perfect escape. He thought he had hidden every asset, covered every track, anticipated every move. But Ryan had forgotten one thing. He had spent 7 years teaching Sarah exactly how he operated. Every deal she had helped him close, every proposal she had edited, every investor she had charmed at dinner parties. She knew how his mind worked. She knew where he would hide things. And now she was going to use that knowledge to take back what was hers. 2 weeks later, Sarah sat in Marcus Webb's office with a thick folder of evidence in her lap and something she had not felt in months. Hope. I have good news and interesting news, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. Which do you want first? Good news, Sarah said. Ryan's lawyer reached out this morning. They are offering a settlement. Sarah's heart began to pound. How much? $200,000. Full custody of the baby when she is born. You walk away clean, no strings attached. Sarah stared at him. $200,000. It was more money than she had ever had in her life. It was enough to rent a small apartment, buy baby supplies, maybe even put a down payment on a condo someday. It was not what she deserved after 7 years of marriage to a man worth millions, but it was something. What is the interesting news, she asked. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. They are scared. Ryan's lawyer, Victoria Cross, is known as the pit bull. She does not make settlement offers unless she thinks she might lose. He leaned forward. The voicemail spooked them. They know that if this goes to trial and we prove adultery, that prenup is worthless. They would rather pay you off now than risk losing half of everything later. Sarah looked at the number on the settlement offer. $200,000. It would be so easy to take it. Sign a paper, walk away, start over. But something nagged at her, a voice in the back of her head that sounded like her mother. He intercepts your mail, the voice said. He cancels your credit cards the moment you walk out the door. He has been planning this for months. Do you really think 200,000 is all he is hiding? What would you do? Sarah asked Marcus. He considered the question carefully. If you were anyone else, I would tell you to take the money. Fighting Ryan Thorne in court will be expensive, stressful, and uncertain. You have a baby coming. Stability matters, but you are not anyone else. He tapped the folder of evidence. You have done more investigative work in 2 weeks than most divorce attorneys do in 6 months. You found shell companies he thought were hidden. You found an apartment he was keeping secret. He leaned back. I think there is more. I think this settlement is hush money designed to make you go away before you find it. Sarah thought about the wire transfers to Delaware, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where was that money going? She thought about Ryan's smug face when he handed her those divorce papers, the certainty in his voice when he told her she would leave with nothing. She thought about her daughter, growing inside her, who would someday ask what kind of woman her mother was. I want to keep digging, Sarah said, but I need to think about the settlement. Can we buy some time? Marcus nodded. I will tell them you are considering the offer. That should give us another week or two. That week, Sarah allowed herself to dream. She looked at apartments online, small places in New Jersey and Queens, where $200,000 could stretch into a new life. She imagined a nursery with yellow walls, a crib by the window, her daughter's first steps on carpet that was all her own. She even allowed herself to think about going back to work. She had been a social worker before she met Ryan, helping families in crisis navigate impossible situations. She had been good at it. Maybe she could be good at it again. For 7 days, Sarah lived in a fantasy where everything was going to be okay. On the 8th day, the fantasy shattered. Sarah was in Marcus's office, ready to discuss her decision about the settlement, when his phone rang. He answered it, and his face went pale. What do you mean, emergency motion? He said into the phone. On what grounds? He listened for a long moment. His jaw tightened. I will call you back. He hung up and looked at Sarah with eyes full of something she had never seen from him before. Fear. What happened? Sarah asked. Ryan filed an emergency motion this morning, Marcus said slowly. He is claiming that you are mentally unstable and unfit to be a mother. He is seeking full custody of your baby. The room tilted. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair to keep from falling. What? That does not make any sense. He does not even want this baby. He is not doing this because he wants custody, Marcus said grimly. He is doing this to destroy you. He slid a document across his desk. Ryan's lawyers had submitted evidence claiming Sarah was mentally unfit. A psychiatric evaluation from a doctor Sarah had never met. Statements from anonymous sources claiming she had been erratic and depressed. And photographs. Photographs of Sarah entering the women's shelter. Photographs of her waiting in line at the free clinic. Photographs taken by someone who had been following her. He has been having me watched, Sarah whispered. Standard tactic for someone like him, Marcus said. He is building a narrative. Poor homeless woman in a shelter, no gushao, no income, mental health concerns. He is going to argue that the baby would be better off with him and Madison in their penthouse than with you in your current situation. Sarah felt like she was drowning. Every time she tried to get her head above water, Ryan pushed her back down. The settlement offer is off the table, Marcus continued. His lawyers withdrew it this morning. They are going for the kill now. Sarah's hands went to her belly. Her daughter kicked, as if sensing her mother's distress. He is going to take my baby, she said, and her voice cracked. Marcus, he does not even want her. He told me last year he was not sure about having kids. This is just to hurt me. I know, Marcus said, and we are going to need on. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. This just got a lot harder. We are not just fighting for money anymore. We are fighting for your daughter. Sarah looked at the photographs of herself, tired, alone, vulnerable. She thought about what Ryan wanted her to do. He wanted her to panic. He wanted her to make a mistake. He wanted her to crumble so he could point at the pieces and say, "See? I told you she was unstable." She took a deep breath. "Tell me what I need to do," she said, and her voice was steady. The next 3 weeks were the worst of Sarah's life. And considering everything she had already survived, that was saying something. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah was sitting in the shelter common room, reviewing documents for her case on Gloria's borrowed laptop. She had just found another suspicious wire transfer, another breadcrumb in the trail of Ryan's deception, when she felt it, a warmth spreading down her legs, a tightening in her abdomen that stole her breath. "No," she whispered, "not yet. Please, not yet." She was only 34 weeks pregnant. 6 weeks early, too early. "Gloria," Sarah called out, her voice thin with panic. "Gloria, something is wrong." Gloria Henderson had seen a lot in her 12 years volunteering at the shelter. She had seen women arrive with broken bones and broken spirits. She had seen children clutching teddy bears while their mothers filled out paperwork with shaking hands. But the look on Sarah's face made her blood run cold. She was at Sarah's side in an instant. "Oh, honey," Gloria breathed, seeing the fluid pooling on the floor beneath Sarah's chair. "Okay, okay, we are going to be fine. Linda, call 911. Now." The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. It felt like 7 hours. Sarah spent the ride to the hospital alone in the back, a stranger in a uniform monitoring her vitals while she clutched her belly and prayed to a God she was not sure she believed in anymore. "Please," she whispered over and over, "please let her be okay. Take anything else. Take everything else. Just let her be okay." The lights of Manhattan blurred past the ambulance windows. Somewhere out there, Ryan was probably drinking champagne with Madison in the penthouse Sarah had once called home. He was probably laughing about how easy it had been to discard her. He probably was not thinking about her at all. But Sarah was thinking about him. She was thinking about how he had done this to her. How the stress of his betrayal, the homelessness, the legal battles, the constant fear, had pushed her body past its breaking point. If something happened to this baby, it would be his fault, and she would never, ever forgive him. The delivery was fast and terrifying. Sarah barely had time to process what was happening before the doctors were telling her to push. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a ripping, tearing agony that made her scream until her throat was raw. And then silence. A terrible, endless silence. "Why is not she crying?" Sarah gasped. "Why is not my baby crying?" The medical team moved with practiced efficiency, whisking the tiny form away to a warming table where Sarah could not see. She tried to sit up, tried to see what was happening, but her body would not cooperate. "Please," she begged, "please tell me she is okay." An eternity passed. 10 seconds, 20, 30, and then finally a sound. Thin and reedy, barely more than a kitten's mew, but unmistakably alive. Her daughter's first cry. "Your daughter is breathing," a nurse said, appearing at Sarah's side. "She is small, only 4 pounds 3 ounces, and she is going to need some help. We are taking her to the NICU. You did good, Mom. You did so good." Sarah collapsed back onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. She had not even held her baby yet. She had not even seen her face. "Her name is Lily," Sarah whispered. "After my mother, her name is Lily." The NICU was a strange twilight world of beeping machines and hushed voices. Babies the size of kittens lay in plastic boxes, their tiny bodies connected to wires and tubes that seemed to dwarf them entirely. Lily was in the corner, under a warming light, a ventilator helping her breathe. She had a shock of dark hair and the tiniest fingers Sarah had ever seen. She looked like a doll. She looked impossibly fragile. Sarah sat in a hard plastic chair next to the incubator, her hand pressed against the warm plastic, as close as she could get to her daughter without disturbing the wires. "I am here," she whispered. "Mommy is here. You fight, okay? You fight, and I will fight too. We are going to get through this together." The first night was the longest of Sarah's life. She did not sleep. She did not eat. She just sat there, watching Lily's tiny chest rise and fall with mechanical precision, willing each breath to lead to another. The nurses tried to get her to rest. The social workers tried to get her to fill out paperwork. Sarah ignored them all. She was not leaving her daughter, not for anything. On the second day, the doctor said Lily was stable. Critical, but stable. Her lungs were developing. She was a fighter. Of course she is, Sarah thought. She is my daughter. On the third day, Sarah learned how to feed Lily through a tube. She learned how to change her diaper without disturbing the monitors. She learned the names of every nurse, every doctor, every cleaning staff member who passed through the NICU. And on the third day, the papers arrived. Sarah was in the NICU waiting room, having finally been convinced to step away for 10 minutes to eat a granola bar when she saw him. A man in a cheap suit with a manila envelope in his hand, scanning the room like a predator, searching for prey. Sarah Mitchell Thorne, he asked when his eyes landed on her. She knew before he even handed her the envelope. She knew, and something inside her turned to ice. You have been served. The papers were worse than she had feared. Emergency motion for temporary protective custody, Ryan Thorne versus Sarah Mitchell Thorne. The petitioner requests immediate custody of the minor child, Lily Thorne, on the grounds that the respondent is unable to provide adequate care due to unstable living situation, lack of financial resources, and demonstrated mental health concerns. He was trying to take her baby, her premature 4-pound baby who was fighting for her life in the NICU. He was trying to take her. Sarah read the motion 3 times, standing in the middle of the waiting room while other families moved around her like water around a stone. She read the allegations. Unstable, unfit, unable. She read the supporting evidence, photographs of her at the shelter, statements from anonymous sources claiming she had been erratic and depressed. And she read the attached psychiatric evaluation from a Dr. Harold Mercer, a doctor she had never met, claiming she showed signs of postpartum depression risk and potential danger to herself or others. It was lies. All of it was lies. But Ryan had money to make lies look like truth. He had lawyers who could spin fiction into fact. He had a system that was designed to believe men like him over women like her. Sarah walked back to the NICU on numb legs. She stood in front of Lily's incubator, watching her daughter sleep, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. For months, she had been playing defense, taking the hits, hoping Ryan would eventually back off, come to his senses, show some shred of the man she thought she had married. That hope died in the NICU. In its place, something harder took root, something that would burn before it would bend. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a number she had not dialed in 7 years, her brother Daniel. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. 4. Voicemail. Danny, Sarah said, and her voice cracked on his name. It is Sarah. I know I do not deserve to ask you for anything. I know I chose him over you. I know I was wrong about everything. She paused, struggling to find words for the enormity of what she needed. They are trying to take my daughter. My baby is in the NICU fighting for her life, and Ryan is trying to take her away from me. I do not know what to do. I do not have anyone else to call. She pressed her free hand against Lily's incubator, drawing strength from the warmth of her daughter's presence. I am so sorry, Danny, for everything, for not listening when you warned me about him, for choosing him over you, for missing 7 years of your life because I was too proud and too blind to admit I was wrong. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she did not care. Please, if you ever love me at all, please help me. I cannot lose her. She is all I have left. She hung up and stared at the phone, waiting for something that would probably never come. The next 3 days were an exercise in hell. Sarah did not leave the hospital. She slept in a plastic chair when she slept at all. She ate granola bars from the vending machine when the nurses insisted. She spent every moment she could at Lily's bedside, talking to her, singing to her, willing her to grow stronger. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the head of the NICU, began stopping by every few hours. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair who had been delivering babies for 20 years. You need to take care of yourself, Dr. Morrison told Sarah on the third day. Lily is stable. She is doing well. You will not be any good to her if you collapse. I cannot leave her, Sarah said. What if something happens when I am gone? Dr. Morrison sat down in the chair next to her. Mrs. Thorne, I have been doing this for a long time. I have seen mothers who visit once a day, mothers who visit once a week, mothers who sign the papers and never come back at all. She looked at Sarah with an expression of deep respect. You have been here every single day. You have learned her feeding schedule and her medication routine. You know which nurse she likes best and what position helps her sleep. Whatever is happening in your life outside these walls, whatever that man is trying to take from you, this right here is your evidence. She gestured to Sarah, to the dark circles under her eyes and the wrinkled clothes and the fierce, desperate love radiating from every pore. This is what a mother looks like. Sarah felt tears spilling over before she could stop them. She had not even realized she was crying. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saying that. I am not just saying it, Dr. Morrison replied. I am willing to testify to it in court if necessary. On the fourth day, a nurse woke Sarah from a fitful sleep. Ms. Mitchell, there is someone here to see you. Sarah sat up, her heart immediately racing. She expected a process server. Another attack, another piece of Ryan's campaign to destroy her. Instead, she saw her brother. Daniel Mitchell stood in the doorway of the waiting room, looking exactly like she remembered and completely different at the same time. He was 40 now, with the broad shoulders and calloused hands of a man who worked the land. But there was something else in his face, something successful, something confident, and something that looked a lot like relief. Danny, Sarah breathed. You look terrible, he said. And then she was in his arms, sobbing against his chest, while 7 years of silence dissolved like morning frost. You came, she managed. Of course I came. His arms tightened around her. You are my sister. You think I would not come? He held her until the sobs subsided, then pulled back to look at her properly. He took in the dark circles, the weight loss, the hospital bracelet on her wrist, the haunted look in her eyes. Where is she? He asked quietly. Where is my niece? Sarah led him to the NICU. She watched her brother's face as he saw Lily for the first time, this tiny creature, surrounded by wires and machines, fighting for every breath. She is beautiful, Daniel said, and his voice cracked on the words. She looks like Mom. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Daniel stood there for a long moment, his hand pressed against the incubator, watching Lily sleep. When he turned back to Sarah, his expression had hardened into something fierce and protective. Tell me everything, he said. Tell me what that bastard has done to you. They sat in the hospital cafeteria while Sarah talked. Daniel bought her the first real meal she had eaten in days, a burger and fries and a chocolate milkshake that tasted like heaven. And he listened without interrupting while she laid out the whole terrible story. The anniversary, the divorce papers, the shelter, the legal battles, the custody motion. When she finished, Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. The headline on the screen made Sarah's head spin. Mitchell Family Farms acquired by Whole Foods in $85 million deal. What is this? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. After Mom and Dad died, I took over the farm, Daniel said. You know that. What you do not know is what happened next. He took a deep breath. I expanded. Organic produce first, then sustainable meat, then farm-to-table supply chains for restaurants across the Midwest. Last year, Whole Foods made an offer I could not refuse. I sold 60% of the company, kept 40% in the CEO position. Sarah stared at him. You are telling me you are rich? I am not a billionaire, Daniel said with a slight smile. But I am comfortable, very comfortable. Why did you not tell me? I tried. The smile faded from his face. I sent letters, Sarah. I sent emails. Every single one came back returned to sender. I thought you hated me. I thought you had cut me out of your life because I criticized Ryan. Sarah felt sick. He intercepted them. Ryan intercepted all of it. I know that now. Daniel's jaw tightened. There is something else you need to know, Sarah. Something I did not want to tell you over voicemail. He reached across the table and took her hand. Dad passed away 3 years ago. Heart attack. It was quick. The doctor said he did not suffer. We tried to reach you for the funeral. The letters came back. The emails bounced. We even tried calling the number we had for you, but it was disconnected. Sarah could not breathe. Her father was dead. She had missed his funeral. She had missed saying goodbye. Because Ryan wanted to control her. Because Ryan wanted to make sure she had nowhere to go when he was done with her. The grief and the rage crashed together inside her like two tidal waves, fusing into something unbreakable. "Danny," she said, and her voice was calm in a way that surprised her. "I need help. Not money, not a rescue. I need help fighting for my daughter." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Then let us fight," he said. Daniel Mitchell did not try to take over. That was the first thing Sarah noticed, and it meant more to her than she could express. He listened. He asked questions. He offered resources without conditions or expectations. He treated her like a capable adult who had been dealt a terrible hand, not a helpless victim who needed saving. "I am not going to swoop in and fix everything," he told her that first night, sitting in the hospital cafeteria over cold coffee. "That is not how this works, and honestly, that is not what you need. You need tools. You need support. You need someone in your corner who believes in you." He leaned back in his chair. "I am that person. But this is your fight, Sarah. You are the one who has to win it. I am just here to help you get what you need." The tools came quickly. First, a new lawyer. Janet Harrison was 55 years old with silver-streaked hair, a voice like honey over steel, and a reputation that preceded her by miles. She had spent 3 decades in family law, and she had built her career on one simple principle: protecting women and children from men who thought money could buy anything. She charged $400 an hour. Daniel paid the retainer without blinking. "I have reviewed your case file," Janet told Sarah at their first meeting, in a corner office that overlooked Central Park. "Marcus Webb did solid work, especially considering his resources. But this is a different kind of fight now." She spread Sarah's evidence across her mahogany conference table. The screenshots, the voicemail, the financial records. "You are not just divorcing a rich man," Janet continued. "You are going to war with one. And war requires strategy." She looked Sarah directly in the eye. "Here is what you need to understand about custody battles. Judges do not care about money. They do not care about who has the bigger house or the fancier car. They care about 3 things: stability, presence, and genuine intent. If we can prove that Ryan does not actually want this child, that he is using her as a weapon to hurt you, we win." "How do we prove that?" Sarah asked. "By showing who he really is," Janet replied, "and by being ready for everything he is going to throw at you." She was not exaggerating. Over the next few weeks, Ryan's legal team launched a full assault. They filed motion after motion, each one designed to drain Sarah's resources and wear down her resolve. They demanded financial disclosures she could not provide because Ryan had controlled all their accounts. They requested psychological evaluations from doctors they had handpicked. They even tried to subpoena the shelter's records to prove Sarah's instability. Janet blocked every attack. She filed counter motions. She demanded discovery that forced Ryan to reveal his hidden accounts. She turned every weapon he aimed at Sarah back against him. But more importantly, Sarah did not break. She moved out of the shelter and into a small apartment that Daniel helped her find. 1 bedroom, a galley kitchen, a view of a parking lot. It was nothing special. But it was stable, it was safe, and it was hers. She visited Lily every single day, documenting every feeding, every diaper change, every moment she spent at her daughter's bedside. Dr. Morrison noted it all in Lily's medical records. Exceptional maternal bonding, remarkable dedication. And she built her team. Gloria Henderson from the shelter agreed to testify about Sarah's character. "I have seen hundreds of women come through our doors," Gloria said. "Sarah is one of the strongest. She never complained, never asked for special treatment, never gave up. That kind of strength does not come from nowhere." Marcus Webb, her original lawyer, volunteered his files and his testimony. "I knew from our first meeting that she was different," he said. "Most people in her situation would have taken the settlement and walked away. She refused to give up." And then there was Amanda Brooks. Amanda was 28 years old, with purple streaks in her hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector from 10 feet away. She ran a cybersecurity firm out of her Brooklyn apartment, specializing in digital forensics and what she cheerfully called finding dirt on terrible people. Janet Harrison called her the best in the city. "Your husband thinks he is smart," Amanda told Sarah after reviewing the evidence. "He is not smart. He is arrogant. And arrogant people make mistakes." She pulled up a series of documents on her laptop. "The LLC in Delaware? It is a holding company for hidden assets. He has been funneling money into it for years, skimming from his own company, hiding it from investors and from you. But here is the thing, she grinned. He used his personal email to set up the account, the same email he uses for everything. And he used a password that my grandmother could crack. Sarah leaned forward. What did you find? Everything. Amanda's grin widened. Wire transfers totaling about $12 million over the past 5 years. Property valuations that do not match reality. Reports to the city that contain numbers he literally pulled out of thin air. She looked at Sarah with something like admiration. Your husband is not just a cheater and an abuser. He is a fraud. Securities fraud, wire fraud, probably tax fraud too. If this gets to the wrong people, he is not just losing his marriage. He is going to prison. Sarah thought about Ryan in handcuffs, Ryan in an orange jumpsuit, Ryan stripped of everything he had built on lies and cruelty. She thought about her father, who had died while she was trapped in a marriage to a man who controlled her every move, who had probably died thinking his daughter did not love him anymore. Keep digging, Sarah told Amanda. Find everything. The first custody hearing arrived on a cold Tuesday in November. Sarah wore a simple black dress that Gloria had helped her pick out. Professional but not flashy, the kind of thing a responsible mother would wear. Ryan arrived with a parade of lawyers and Madison Cole on his arm. Madison was wearing white, because of course she was. She looked at Sarah with undisguised contempt, the kind of look a woman gives another woman she considers beneath her. Sarah kept her face neutral. She had learned over these months how to wear her emotions like armor. The hearing was brutal. Victoria Cross, Ryan's lawyer, painted a picture of a woman spiraling out of control, an abandoned wife who had ended up in a homeless shelter, a mother who had delivered her baby prematurely due to stress, a woman who was so unstable she could not even maintain housing. She presented the photographs of Sarah at the shelter, at the clinic, at the hospital. She quoted anonymous sources who claimed Sarah had been erratic and depressed. This is a woman in crisis, Victoria declared, a woman who cannot provide the stability a newborn needs. My client is offering to step up, to provide a safe, secure environment for his daughter, while Mrs. Thorne gets the help she clearly needs. Then it was Janet's turn. She did not raise her voice. She did not make dramatic gestures. She simply laid out the facts. Mrs. Thorne ended up in a shelter because her husband threw her out of their home on their 7th anniversary. He canceled her credit cards within hours of her leaving. He denied her access to any marital assets. He did this while she was 8 months pregnant. She held up a stack of documents. He filed for divorce. He demanded she leave with nothing. He moved his mistress into their home before the bed was even cold. And now he claims he wants custody of a child he spent months pretending did not exist? Janet called Dr. Morrison to the stand. The NICU director testified about Sarah's dedication, her daily visits, her determination to learn everything about caring for a premature infant. I have been doing this for 20 years, Dr. Morrison said. I have never seen a more devoted mother. Then Janet played the voicemail. Ryan's voice filled the courtroom, smooth and confident, speaking words meant for another woman. Baby, I cannot wait to see you tonight. Wear that red thing. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Patricia Simmons, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, who had clearly seen every trick in the book, looked at Ryan with an expression that could curdle milk. Mr. Thorne, she said, would you like to explain this? Ryan's lawyer tried to object. The judge overruled her. The ruling came at the end of the day. Temporary custody is awarded to Mrs. Thorne. Mr. Thorne will have supervised visitation rights, should he choose to exercise them. We will reconvene in 6 months for a final determination. Sarah collapsed into Janet's arms outside the courthouse. It was not over. It was not even close to over. But she had won the first battle. For one beautiful week, everything seemed okay. Lily came home from the hospital. Sarah set up the nursery in her tiny apartment, painting one wall yellow just like she had always dreamed. She held her daughter and fed her and rocked her to sleep, and for 7 perfect days she allowed herself to believe that the worst was behind her. She should have known better. Ryan Thorne did not lose gracefully. He did not lose at all if he could help it, and he had resources Sarah could barely imagine. The notification appeared on Sarah's phone at 6:14 in the morning. She was in the middle of feeding Lily, still half asleep, when her phone started buzzing. And buzzing, and buzzing. 17 missed calls, 42 text messages, 3 voicemails. She picked up the phone with her free hand and felt her blood turn to ice. She was trending on Twitter, #GoldDiggerSarah. With trembling fingers, she clicked on the hashtag. The article was everywhere. Every gossip site, every tabloid, every corner of social media had picked it up. Scheming wife targeted wealthy CEO, trapped him with pregnancy. The story painted Sarah as a calculating gold digger who had targeted Ryan from the beginning. It included photos of her at the shelter, looking exhausted and defeated. Quotes from anonymous sources claiming she had always been jealous and manipulative. A detailed breakdown of her brother's net worth, painting the whole thing as a family shakedown. But the worst part, the part that made Sarah's hands shake so badly she nearly dropped Lily, was the texts. Doctored text messages between Sarah and someone identified only as a close friend. Messages where Sarah apparently admitted to getting pregnant on purpose to trap Ryan. Messages where she discussed how much money she could get in the divorce. Messages where she laughed about playing the victim. They were fake. Sarah knew they were fake because she had never sent them. But they looked real. They looked devastating. She scrolled through the comments with the horrified fascination of watching a car crash. Gold-digging whore. She should lose custody. Women like her are why men cannot trust anyone. I hope she ends up on the street where she belongs. Someone posted her address. Sarah was still sitting frozen in her rocking chair, Lily sleeping peacefully against her chest, when her phone rang. Janet Harrison. Do not look at social media, Janet said immediately. Do not respond to anything. Do not talk to anyone. Get Lily and get somewhere safe. I am on my way. But safe was not something Sarah could find. Within 24 hours, her landlord called. He had seen the articles. He did not want the drama of a viral controversy in his building. She had 48 hours to vacate. Within 48 hours, a social worker appeared at her door. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint about the instability of her living situation. The social worker was sympathetic but firm. She had to follow up on all complaints. Within 72 hours, Janet called with the worst news of all. The judge has agreed to reopen the custody case. Ryan's lawyers submitted the doctored texts as new evidence. They are claiming you committed fraud. Sarah stood in Daniel's hotel room, Lily sleeping in a portable crib, and felt the last of her strength crumbling. 3 steps forward, 5 steps back. Every time she thought she had found solid ground, Ryan pulled it out from under her. I cannot do this anymore, she told Daniel. Her voice was flat, empty, hollowed out by exhaustion and despair. He has unlimited money. He has PR people. He has lawyers. He has an entire machine designed to destroy me, and I have nothing. She looked at Lily, peaceful and oblivious in her crib. Maybe she would be better off, Sarah whispered. Maybe I should just let him win. At least then she would have stability, security, a home. Do not you dare finish that sentence. Daniel grabbed her shoulders and forced her to look at him. His eyes were fierce, almost angry. You listen to me, Sarah Mitchell. You are not the woman Ryan says you are. You are not weak. You are not a gold digger. You are not crazy or unstable or unfit. His grip tightened. You survived mom and dad dying. You survived being cut off from everyone who loved you. You gave birth alone in a hospital while your husband was on vacation with his mistress. You have fought for your daughter every single day since she was born. He gave her a small shake. You are the strongest person I have ever known. And if you think I am going to let you give up now, you do not know me at all. Sarah was crying now, tears she had been holding back for months finally breaking free. I am so tired, Danny. I am so tired of fighting. I know. His voice softened, but we are not done yet. We are not even close to done. He pulled her into a hug, and for a moment she let herself be held. Let herself be weak. Let herself lean on someone else, for the first time in years. Those texts are fake, Daniel said into her hair. And we are going to prove it. Then we are going to destroy him. Amanda Brooks worked through the night. She pulled the doctored texts apart bite by bite, examining the metadata, the timestamps, the digital fingerprints that most people did not even know existed. By morning, she had her answer. These are definitely fake, Amanda told Sarah and Daniel over video call. The metadata does not match. The timestamps are inconsistent with actual message patterns. And whoever created them made a rookie mistake. She pulled up a side-by-side comparison on her screen. See this? The font rendering is slightly different in the faked messages. It is subtle, barely noticeable, but it is there. Whoever did this used a screenshot generator, not actual text messages. Can you prove it in court? Daniel asked. I can prove it so thoroughly that the judge will want to throw Ryan in jail for perjury. Amanda grinned, but that is not even the best part. She clicked to another screen. I traced the metadata back to its source. The doctored images were created on a computer registered to Thorne Property Group, specifically a computer in the office of 1 Victoria Cross. Sarah stared at the screen. His own lawyer faked the evidence. Looks that way, Amanda leaned back in her chair. And that is not just perjury. That is conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and about 5 different bar violations. If I were Victoria Cross, I would be looking for a new career right about now. It was ammunition, powerful ammunition, but it was not enough. We can prove the texts are fake, Janet said when they met to discuss strategy. We can probably get Victoria Cross disbarred, but Ryan will just claim he did not know. He will blame an overzealous assistant. He will play the victim. She looked at Sarah. We need more. We need someone who can testify to his pattern of behavior. Someone he has done this to before. As if in answer to a prayer Sarah had not known she was making, the email arrived that night. I have information about Ryan Thorne. Meet me at Cafe Lucia, Tuesday at 3 p.m. Come alone. Sarah knew it could be a trap. She knew Ryan was capable of anything, but she also knew she was running out of options. She went to the cafe with Daniel waiting outside, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. And she found herself face to face with Jessica Wade. Jessica was 32 years old with haunted eyes and fingers that trembled around her coffee cup. She had been beautiful once, Sarah could tell, but fear and regret had worn grooves into her face that made her look a decade older. You do not know me, Jessica said, but I know you. I have been following your story. She took a shaky breath. I was Ryan's executive assistant before Madison, and I was his mistress too, for almost 2 years. Sarah felt sick. How many women? How many lives had Ryan destroyed? He did the same thing to me, Jessica continued. The charm, the promises, the gifts. He made me feel special. Made me feel like I was the only one who really understood him. She laughed bitterly. Then I got pregnant. The word hung in the air between them. What happened? Sarah asked softly. He wanted me to terminate, said it would ruin everything. When I refused, he fired me, threatened to destroy my career if I ever told anyone, made me sign an NDA in exchange for a settlement that barely covered my medical bills. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I was too scared to fight. I was alone and terrified, and I did not have anyone in my corner. So I took the money and I disappeared. She looked at Sarah with something like desperation. But I kept everything. Emails, recordings, documents. I kept it all because I knew someday someone would be brave enough to fight him. And I wanted to help when that day came. Why me? Sarah asked. Why now? Because you are the first one who did not give up. Jessica reached across the table and gripped Sarah's hand. I have watched him do this to 3 other women, Sarah. 3 women who took settlements or dropped cases or just walked away. You are the first one, Moyne, who actually fought back. She opened her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Everything is on here. Emails where he talked about managing you. Recordings of him bragging about how easy it was to control you. Evidence that Madison is not even his first affair during your marriage. Her voice hardened. There were 5 women, Sarah. 5 women in 7 years, and that is just the ones I know about. Sarah took the flash drive. It was small, innocuous, lighter than a pack of gum, but it held the power to destroy a man who thought he was untouchable. Thank you, she said. Do not thank me. Jessica stood up to leave, then paused. I should have documented everything from the start. I should have trusted my instincts when things felt wrong. I am telling you now what I wish someone had told me. She met Sarah's eyes. Your gut is usually right. Listen to it, and do not let him win. His final hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday in January, almost exactly 1 year after Ryan had handed Sarah those divorce papers on their anniversary. 1 year. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like yesterday. Sarah arrived at the courthouse at 8:30 in the morning. Janet Harrison was already there, along with Amanda Brooks and Jessica Wade. Daniel waited in the hallway, ready to play his part when the time came. How are you feeling? Janet asked. Terrified, Sarah admitted. But ready. Good. Janet squeezed her arm. Terror is appropriate. But remember what I told you. The facts are on our side. The evidence is on our side. And most importantly, the truth is on our side. She looked toward the courtroom doors. Let him think he is winning. Let him get comfortable. And then we pull the rug out from under him. Ryan arrived at 9 with his usual entourage. Victoria Cross, looking slightly less confident than usual. Madison Cole, who had upgraded from mistress to fiancée and was wearing a diamond the size of a small asteroid. A team of associates carrying boxes of documents designed to overwhelm and intimidate. Ryan himself looked exactly like what he was. A man who had never lost anything in his life and did not intend to start now. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Sarah's apartment deposit. His hair was perfect. His smile was confident. He did not even look at Sarah as he walked past. The hearing began with Victoria Cross presenting Ryan's case. The narrative was familiar. Sarah was unstable, vindictive, a gold digger who had trapped a wealthy man with a pregnancy. The text, she claimed, proved that Sarah had planned the whole thing from the beginning. My client is a respected businessman who has been victimized by a scheming spouse, Victoria declared. He simply wants what is best for his daughter, a stable home, financial security, 2 parents who can provide for her needs. She turned to look at Sarah with undisguised contempt. Mrs. Thorne has been homeless. She has been unemployed. She delivered her baby prematurely due to her own inability to manage stress. What kind of life can she offer this child? Then it was Janet's turn. She stood slowly, deliberately, letting the silence build. Your Honor, she began, what we have witnessed in this case is not a concerned father seeking custody of his child. It is a systematic campaign of destruction, waged by a wealthy man against the wife he discarded. She walked to the center of the courtroom. Mr. Thorne threw his wife out of their home on their 7th anniversary. He canceled her credit cards, froze her access to marital assets, and moved his mistress into their bed before the sheets were cold. When Mrs. Thorne found the strength to fight back, he launched a media campaign to destroy her reputation. And when that was not enough, he fabricated evidence. She nodded to Amanda. I would like to call Amanda Brooks to the stand. Amanda walked to the witness box with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was about to unleash. Ms. Brooks, Janet said, can you tell the court about your analysis of the text messages submitted as evidence by Mr. Thorne's legal team? Amanda smiled. I would be happy to. For the next 20 minutes, she systematically demolished Ryan's evidence. She showed the altered metadata. She highlighted the timestamp inconsistencies. She displayed the font rendering discrepancies that proved the messages had been fabricated. And then she dropped the bomb. I traced the origin of these doctored images, Amanda said. They were created on a computer registered to Thorne Property Group, specifically a computer in the office of Miss Victoria Cross. The courtroom erupted. Ryan jumped to his feet. Victoria Cross went pale. Judge Simmons banged her gavel. Order. Order in this court. She fixed Ryan with a stare that could freeze lava. Mr. Thorne, are you aware that submitting falsified evidence is a felony? Ryan's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in his life, he had no words. I had nothing to do with this, he finally sputtered. It must have been a mistake. Someone on my team must have. A mistake, Judge Simmons repeated flatly. I see. Janet was not done. Your Honor, I would like to call Jessica Wade to the stand. Jessica walked to the witness box with her head held high. Her hands were still trembling, but her voice was steady. She told the court about her affair with Ryan, about the pregnancy, about the threats in the NDA and the settlement that had bought her silence. He made me feel like I was crazy, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. Like everything was my fault. He told me no one would believe me. He told me he would destroy me if I ever spoke up. She looked at Ryan. I was terrified for 5 years, but I am not terrified anymore. Sarah is not a gold digger, Your Honor. She is a survivor, and Ryan Thorne is a predator. The courtroom was silent. Finally, Janet played the recording. Ryan's voice filled the room, casual and confident, speaking to a colleague he thought he could trust. Sarah is easy. She has got no family, no friends, no money. I own her. She will never leave because she has nowhere to go. The words hung in the air like poison. And that was when the courtroom doors opened. Daniel Mitchell walked in, but he was not alone. Behind him were two men in dark suits with FBI badges. And behind them, a woman with a briefcase and an SEC identification card. Janet rose to her feet. Your Honor, in the course of investigating the falsified evidence, we discovered additional financial irregularities that we were obligated to report to federal authorities. Mr. Thorne has been operating a fraudulent investment scheme through his company, misleading investors about property values and funneling approximately $12 million into hidden accounts. She handed a stack of documents to the bailiff. These are the findings of a forensic financial analysis, as well as copies of the reports that have been submitted to the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Ryan jumped to his feet. This is a witch hunt. This is lies. Victoria, do something. But Victoria Cross was already packing her briefcase. She had not become the most feared divorce lawyer in New York by going down with sinking ships. Ryan tried to run. The FBI agents caught him before he made it 3 steps. Ryan Thorne, you are under arrest for securities fraud and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As they handcuffed him, Ryan twisted to look at Sarah. His face was contorted with rage, all his polish and charm stripped away to reveal the monster underneath. You did this, he snarled. You destroyed me. Sarah stood up slowly. She looked at the man she had loved for 7 years, the man who had promised to cherish her forever, the man who had tried to take everything from her, including her daughter. No, Ryan, she said. Her voice was calm, steady, free. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you destroy me too. They led him away in handcuffs. Madison fled the courtroom without looking back, her massive engagement ring suddenly looking less like a trophy and more like a millstone. Victoria Cross disappeared before anyone could ask her questions. She would lose her license within the month. And Sarah stood in the wreckage of her marriage, surrounded by the people who had helped her fight, and felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Peace. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. The final settlement gave Sarah full custody of Lily. No visitation rights for Ryan, who was currently awaiting trial in federal custody. She received the marital home, which she sold immediately. She had no interest in living in a place haunted by so many bad memories. She received 60% of the remaining marital assets after legal fees and creditor claims. About $2.1 million. It was not the hundreds of millions Ryan had hidden away. Most of that money was frozen, claimed by defrauded investors, tied up in legal proceedings that would take years to resolve. But it was enough to start over, enough to build something new, enough to give Lily everything she needed and then some. Sarah moved to Ohio, not to Daniel's farm, but to a small town nearby called Millowbrook, a place with tree-lined streets and good schools and neighbors who waved when you walked by. A place where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were just friends you had not met yet. She bought a house with a big backyard and a wraparound porch. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just solid and safe in hers. She painted Lily's room yellow, just like she had always dreamed. She planted a garden in the backyard and watched things grow, and she went back to work. The women's shelter in Millbrook was small and chronically underfunded. They needed a social worker who understood what their clients had been through, who could look at a scared, broken woman and see not a victim, but a survivor waiting to be born. Sarah understood better than anyone. Her first day on the job, she met a woman named Rebecca, 26 years old, with bruises on her arms and terror in her eyes. She reminded Sarah so much of herself that it physically hurt. They sat together in the intake room while Rebecca cried and apologized and swore she was being stupid and should just go back. Sarah let her talk, let her cry, let her get it all out. Then she leaned forward and spoke. I know it feels like the end, Sarah said. I know you think this is as bad as it gets and there is nowhere to go from here. But I am going to tell you something that someone told me when I was exactly where you are. She reached out and took Rebecca's hand. The ones who did everything right are usually the ones whose husbands did everything wrong. You are not stupid. You are not weak. You are not the things he told you that you were. Rebecca looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. How do you know? Because I was you, Sarah said simply. 1 year ago, I was sitting in a shelter just like this one, 8 months pregnant, with nothing but the clothes on my back and 1,000 reasons to give up. She smiled. I did not give up. And you are not going to either. Rebecca cried harder, but this time the tears felt different. Less like despair, more like release. We do not survive alone, Sarah continued. We survive because people help us. Because strangers become friends and friends become family. And someday when you are standing on the other side of this, you are going to help someone else. She squeezed Rebecca's hand. That is how it works. That is how we win. Lily's first birthday party was held in Sarah's backyard on a warm June afternoon. The guest list was small but perfect. Daniel was there, manning the grill with the expertise of a man who had grown up on a farm. He had appointed himself the family's official chef and took the role extremely seriously. Gloria Henderson had flown in from New York. She had officially retired from the shelter but still volunteered 3 days a week. When Sarah had invited her to the party, Gloria had burst into tears and declared that nothing in the world could keep her away from her honorary granddaughter's birthday. Amanda and Jessica came together. They had formed an unlikely friendship in the aftermath of the trial. Amanda was teaching Jessica about cybersecurity. Jessica was teaching Amanda about forensic accounting. They were talking about starting a consulting firm together, helping women protect themselves from men like Ryan. Janet Harrison sent an enormous stuffed elephant in her regrets. She was in the middle of another case, another terrible husband, another woman who needed her help. Sarah understood. And there was one new face at the party, James Riley, 39, the local veterinarian who worked with Daniel's farm. He had kind eyes and gentle hands and the sort of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who you were and being okay with it. Daniel had invited him. For networking purposes, he claimed, though the knowing look in his eyes suggested otherwise. James spent most of the party playing with Lily. He let her grab his fingers, pull his hair, drool on his shirt. He made funny faces that sent her into fits of giggles. He seemed utterly unbothered by the chaos of a 1-year-old. You are good with kids, Sarah said, watching him bounce Lily on his knee. James shrugged. I am good with anything that cannot talk back. Kids, dogs, cows, they are honest. They do not play games, Sarah laughed. Did you just compare my daughter to a cow? He looked at her with mock seriousness. A very cute cow, possibly the cutest cow I have ever met. They talked for hours after that, about nothing important and everything important, about his work, her work, the town, the weather, the way Lily's laugh sounded like music. When he left, he asked for her number. Just in case you ever need a vet, he said, or someone to talk to, or someone to compare your daughter to livestock. Sarah gave it to him. It was not a romance, not yet, but it was a door opening, a possibility she had not allowed herself to imagine for a very long time. That night, after the guests had gone and the house was quiet, Sarah carried Lily upstairs to her yellow room. She settled into the rocking chair by the window and held her daughter close, watching the fireflies blink in the backyard below. I used to think strength meant never needing help, Sarah whispered, never crying, never falling apart. I thought strong people did everything alone. Lily cooed softly, her eyes already heavy with sleep. I was wrong. Strength is not about being invincible. Strength is about falling apart and putting yourself back together. It is about asking for help when you need it. It is about getting up one more time than you fall down. She pressed a kiss to Lily's forehead. I am going to teach you that, little one. I am going to teach you that you are never alone, even when it feels like you are. That your worth is not determined by what anyone else thinks of you. That you can survive anything as long as you do not give up. Lily's tiny hand curled around Sarah's finger. And I am going to teach you to trust your gut, because your gut is usually right. She rocked her daughter gently as the moon rose over the fields. We are going to be okay, she said, I promise. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah Mitchell actually believed it. 2 years later, Sarah's life had become something she never could have imagined on that terrible anniversary night. She was the director of the Millbrook Women's Shelter now, overseeing programs that helped hundreds of families each year. She had expanded the services, added job training and legal aid and childcare. She had written grants, raised funds, built something that would last long after she was gone. She was dating James Riley. It was getting serious. He had asked her to move in with him 3 times. And she had said not yet 3 times, but the way he smiled when she said it suggested he was willing to wait. She was happy, not the fragile, desperate happiness of someone who has never known anything else. The deep, quiet happiness of someone who has walked through fire and emerged on the other side. Lily was a rambunctious 2-year-old who called Daniel Uncle Danny and Gloria Gigi. She loved fireflies and chocolate ice cream and the yellow walls of her bedroom. She had her mother's determination and her grandfather's smile. She had never met her father. She did not know anything about him except that he had been sick and could not take care of her. Someday Sarah would tell her the truth, but not yet, not until she was ready. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the letter arrived. Sarah came home from work to find it waiting in her mailbox. A thick envelope from a law firm in New York. Not Janet Harrison, someone else. She opened it at the kitchen table while Lily played with blocks on the floor. Dear Ms. Mitchell, the letter began, we regret to inform you that Ryan Thorne passed away in federal custody on January 15th. The cause of death was cardiac arrest. Sarah stopped reading. Ryan was dead. She waited to feel something. Grief maybe, or satisfaction, or relief. What she felt was mostly nothing. An emptiness where complicated emotions should be. Whatever love she had once felt for Ryan had died long before he did. Whatever hatred had replaced it had faded into something more like indifference. He was a chapter of her life that was over. He had been over for a long time. She kept reading. Mr. Thorne had named you as a beneficiary in his original will, which was never updated after your divorce. Per his estate, you are entitled to a portion of any assets recovered through ongoing legal proceedings. Sarah did not care about the money. She had enough. More than enough. But the next line caught her attention. Additionally, Mr. Thorne left a personal note to be delivered upon his death. Per his instructions, this note was to be given only to you. There was a smaller envelope inside the larger one. Sarah's name was written on it in Ryan's handwriting, but not the confident scrawl she remembered. This writing was shaky, uncertain, the handwriting of a man who was running out of time. She opened it. Sarah, the letter began. I have started this letter 100 times. I have never known how to finish it. I am dying. I have known for 6 months. Heart condition, they say. Ironic, considering I spent so many years acting like I did not have one. I could fill pages with explanations, excuses, justifications for why I did what I did. But you deserve better than that. You deserve the truth. The truth is, I was broken long before I met you. I learned early that the only way to survive was to take what you wanted and destroy anyone who got in your way. I thought that was strength. I thought that was winning. I was wrong. You were the only real thing in my life. The only person who ever loved me for who I was, not what I could give them. And I was too stupid and too broken to see it. I spent 7 years trying to control you because I was terrified of what would happen if you realized you did not need me. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I need you to know this. You did not destroy me. You saved yourself, and that is exactly what you should have done. I hope Lily never knows who I really was. I hope she only knows who you are. I hope she grows up to be half the woman her mother is. Tell her I loved her, even if I never showed it, even if I did not know how. Tell her that the best thing I ever did was help bring her into the world, even if I was too much of a coward to be part of her life. You deserve better than me, Sarah. I am sorry I was not capable of being what you needed. Ryan. Sarah stared at the letter for a long time. She thought about burning it. She thought about tearing it into pieces and throwing them away and pretending it had never existed. Instead, she folded it carefully and placed it back in its envelope. She walked to her bedroom closet and put it in a box on the top shelf. The box where she kept her parents' wedding rings and Lily's hospital bracelet and a few other precious things. Not for her, for Lily. Someday when her daughter was old enough, Sarah would tell her the truth about her father. All of it, the good and the bad, and everything in between. And then she would give her this letter and let her decide what to do with it. That was Lily's choice to make, not Sarah's. She walked back to the living room where Lily had abandoned her blocks and was now trying to convince the cat to wear a princess tiara. Mama, look, Lily said proudly. Whiskers is a princess. Whiskers, who was very much not enjoying the princess treatment, shot Sarah a look of pure betrayal. Sarah laughed. She scooped Lily up and carried her outside to the backyard. The sun was setting over the fields, painting the sky in shades of golden rose. Daniel was at the grill, arguing with James about the correct way to season a steak. Gloria was on the porch swing, knitting something that might have been a scarf or might have been a small tent. It was hard to tell. Amanda and Jessica had driven up from Columbus for the weekend. They were officially launching their consulting firm next month. They spent most of their time now helping women protect their assets and document abuse before it was too late. This was her family. Not the family she was born into, not the family she had married into, the family she had built, piece by piece, from the wreckage of everything she had lost. James caught her eye across the yard and smiled, the kind of smile that made her stomach flip, even after 2 years. "You okay?" Gloria asked, looking up from her knitting. Sarah settled into the porch swing beside her, Lily squirming in her lap. "Yeah," she said, "I am okay." Gloria studied her face for a moment. "Something happened." Sarah nodded. "I will tell you later. It is not bad. It is just the end of something." Gloria reached over and patted her hand. "Endings are not always bad, honey. Sometimes they are just making room for new beginnings." Sarah watched Lily scramble down from her lap and run toward James, who caught her and swung her up onto his shoulders. She watched Daniel flip steaks and pretend to be annoyed when James criticized his technique. She watched Amanda and Jessica laughing at something on Jessica's phone, their heads bent together like sisters. She thought about everything she had survived: the betrayal, the homelessness, the custody battle, the media attacks, the moments when she had wanted to give up, to surrender, to accept that Ryan was too powerful and she was too small. She had not given up, and now she was here, surrounded by people who loved her, building a life that was entirely her own. "Mama, look!" Lily shouted from James's shoulders. "I am tall." "You are very tall," Sarah called back. "I am the tallest," Lily declared. James caught Sarah's eye and grinned. "She has your humility." Sarah laughed. "Among other things." The sun sank below the horizon and the fireflies began to emerge, blinking their tiny lights across the darkening yard. Lily shrieked with delight and demanded to be put down so she could chase them. Sarah watched her daughter run through the ground, arms outstretched, trying to catch something magical. They say the best revenge is a life well lived, but I do not think about revenge anymore. I think about peace. I think about gratitude. I think about the family I built from the ashes of everything I lost. Ryan wanted me to leave with nothing, but nothing is exactly what I have left of him now. No anger, no bitterness, no regret, nothing but a letter in a box that my daughter will read someday, and the knowledge that I survived. Everything else? Everything that matters? That is all mine. Gloria, Sarah said quietly. "Yes, honey, thank you for everything, for that first cup of tea in the shelter, for believing in me when I could not believe in myself, for being here now." Gloria's eyes glistened. "Oh, sweetheart." She pulled Sarah into a hug. "I did not do anything special. I just saw what was already there. A woman who was going to make it, no matter what." They held each other for a moment. Two women who had seen too much darkness to take light for granted. Then Lily came running back, clutching something in her tiny fist. "Mama, I catched one," she announced breathlessly. "I catched a firebug." Sarah knelt down to look. Sure enough, a single firefly glowed in Lily's cupped hands, its light pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. "What should we do with it?" Sarah asked. Lily considered this very seriously. "Let it go," she decided, "so it can find its family." "That is a very good idea." Together, they opened Lily's hands and watched the firefly drift away into the darkness, its light joining dozens of others blinking across the yard. "Bye-bye, firebug," Lily called. "Find your family." Sarah pulled her daughter close. "She already did," she whispered. "She already did." The end. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they are stronger than they know. And remember, no matter how dark things seem, you are never truly alone. Your story is not over. The best chapters might still be waiting to be written. Until next time.